in one of our Amazon video studios. My name's Roisin O'Sullivan and I head up the recruitment operations for EMEA for the consumer recruitment team. And I'm very excited to have here with us today Brigitte and Darren. We'll go do some formal introductions in a moment. But first of all, I just kind of want to say what is this session? What is Bring Your Voice? And Bring Your Voice to Amazon, for us it means a collection of people who have very different backgrounds, different expressions, different opinions, and how they bring those sort of individual views to their work, and how do we amplify them or encourage them. And we really feel that is a real big part of our customer focused culture here at Amazon, because having those different diverse perspectives really help us, I think, bring different viewpoints and innovation to us. So before I kind of go into some more details of the session, I would love to formally introduce Brigitte and Darren. Brigitte as somebody who has just over a year here at Amazon, and Darren who's been here for almost 15 years, so definitely got a lot of good Amazon knowledge in the room. So Brigitte, love to hear more about your background and what brought you to Amazon.
Yeah, sure. Happy to, and very excited to hi to everybody listening to us. We're really expecting some exciting questions. So yes, I've been at Amazon a year, a little bit over a year actually, and I'm heading some of our entertainment media businesses. I worked initially in books. I've already in less than 13 months changed jobs, which is kind of really exciting. Prior to Amazon, I worked in a number of digital businesses. I launched Suburb International for eBay here in London. I also worked for a private equity-backed education technology business. Prior to that, I was a consultant. I worked in marketing and product, did different things, always in tech and digital businesses. And I've worked and lived both in the US, in France, and in the UK more recently. And I'm also, and that's quite important in when I think about who I am, a mom of 2 kids, Thomas and Alice. So that's
great. Very diverse background for Amazon.
For sure.
And Darren, something about yourself?
Yes, my name's Darren Hardy. I'm the UK manager for Kindle Direct Publishing, which is the service that we've created that helps authors publish their books straight into the Kindle store. As you say, I've been at Amazon now nearly 15 years. I know that with my youthful good looks that doesn't seem possible, but it is true. And I've always worked in books, actually. It's an interesting sort of contrast to Brigitte. And my entire career has always been in books and the book world, even prior to Amazon. And actually, it's sad to say, not even just as part of the day job. At home, books are a big part of our life. And although recently, my 16-year-old daughter, the whole family time is spent persuading her that revising for her GCSEs is fun and really exciting.
Sounds like a different type of challenge.
Very different type of challenge,
outside of Amazon here. So I just want to remind everyone, this is an interactive session. We definitely want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, and we'll get through as many as we can. I've got my colleagues in the room. I've got Amy, Zoe, who are helping manage all your questions, try and get them to me as much as possible. Say hi, guys. And I might be looking behind you while I see the questions come up. But let's kick stuff off with a poll to try and get some interaction going. So would love to hear from you about what does Bring Your Voice mean to you, and how do you feel on bringing your voice to work, and that's kind of going to be the theme of the session today. So while we wait for those poll results to come through and kind of hear your answers, kind of want to throw this question to you, Brigitte, and Darren as well. But Brigitte, if I come to you first, as someone, as an individual or a leader, how do you sort of encourage either bringing yourself or your team's voice to work, and what sort of methods do you use?
So maybe, Roisin, I would start to say what does that mean for me. I think as I was reflecting a little bit on this session, for me it's 3 things mostly. So one is about myself and making sure in some ways I push myself to have as much impact as I can, be at my best at work, and contribute and participate even in things which might not be my zone of comfort or my zone of expertise. So I think that's my definition of bring your voice for myself. For my team, for people around me, I think it's really encouraging others to contribute and participate, and a little bit in the same way, making sure people jump in things which might not be their core topic. I think it's super important. I think it's also really important for people to feel safe about bringing their voice, meaning that in a team environment, we want people to kind of essentially be vulnerable and be able to kind of participate in a fairly balanced way. It's super important to build good teams. It's super important to build trust in a team. So that really matters. And the third thing for me is correlating bring your voice to somehow, connecting that to the voice of your customers.
Yeah.
We really care about customers at Amazon, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I joined. So being able somehow to kind of bring different perspective and show empathy with your customers is also part of this overall theme of bring your voice for me. So I think that's how I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Because we have such a diverse mix of business here and customers that it's always important that you're getting the same viewpoint internally at our company as well, right? And Darren, I'm sure you've, through your years here at Amazon and been in lots of different teams within the books world, must have faced those similar sort of challenges.
I think so, and I think it's a fair reflection, as Brigitte was saying, just how diverse our customer base is. Yeah, if you're always looking at a problem from one particular perspective, it's really hard to then account for all the different types of customers that you have. And in my world currently, that's the same from an author perspective. We have so many different types of author using our products and services. If you're just looking at things from a particular background, that you're only going to be able to speak to a particular part of that audience. So I think having diversity in terms of experience, in terms of views, is a really important part of that. And that also means diversity doesn't just mean that you talk to the people that have been in the business for 15 years, like myself. Actually, just as important is talking to somebody who's been here for 2 or 3 days and can actually bring all sorts of new insights into a problem. And most problems that we face in our business are pretty complex. They've got many different dimensions to them. It's really hard to say there is this one perspective that solves everything.
Yeah.
So that's really important, I think.
And I think you hit on a really interesting point there about having the confidence or like the trust in the team to feel that. So how would you say, like, in those sort of forums where people can share their voices more, which is usually within a team meeting, and as you say, someone could have been here for 2 days or 20 years, how do you sort of foster that feeling that people have the confidence to speak up and kind of give their viewpoint here at Amazon?
Yeah. I think it's a great point, and I would like to say I've launched an initiative recently at Amazon. I think it's public information. Hopefully, I can share that. It's called Amplify. The ultimate goal is to get more women on board, more women in tech, more women in innovative roles. But as part of that, we have one initiative around training, which is building what we call confident contribution. So to answer the question, it's really about making sure people are encouraged to participate. It means, for people who are leading, organizing meetings, being very thoughtful about the way you balance participation, encouraging people to contribute, making sure you acknowledge when people are remote. I think often, it creates some discrepancies in ability for people to have an impact. It's quite hard. Remote, being, just on the phone, being sometimes, across time zones makes it even more difficult. So being super thoughtful about those things. Maybe, asking in a meeting for people who are in the phone to kind of speak first. I think it's often a really good tip and a good tactic to make sure, you hear their voices as well. So there are a number of things, but it's also encouraging people who are in the meeting to kind of participate, contribute, prep for the meeting, and so there are a number of things which are also part of this initiative.
I was just going to say, I've just been having a quick look at the poll that we did at the beginning, and overwhelmingly, I think confidence and having an impact is what, obviously recognised by leadership, diversity and inclusivity, being authentic in there, but confidence and impact has come up quite a few times, and you've said the word impact there a lot, and Darren, I'd love to hear your view, because as someone, myself, recognising that people definitely have huge impacts here at Amazon. How have you found that during your career here and working with lots of different people about how people can see the impact of what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think especially for people coming into the business, I'm sure many people watching this today, very conscious as a new starter in the business. You want to come in and on day one you want to create this huge splash and prove your value to the business and do something really dramatic. And yes, some people do that. It's phenomenal, but equally, I think having the time to learn about teams, to work within teams, and realise that you're part of a very supportive, collaborative network rather than an individual who's expected to sort of have all the answers from day one, I think is really important. And that's something that we spend a lot of time with people when they're starting the business. You take the time to learn, take the time to form connections, because actually being collaborative and having an impact across teams and with multiple different people is just as important as solving the world's problems on your own, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I've seen as well people who don't necessarily are subject matter experts in a meeting, but being very honest about that and kind of just asking that question, like, why are we doing it? And I always think that's like an Amazonian's favourite word is why. Like, why are we doing that? Yeah, I was about to say, yeah.
It's definitely something with our leadership. I've been amazed by when you're in meetings with some incredibly intelligent people who've been thinking about these really meaty problems. Often what they do is ask questions. They're not sitting there saying, here's what we should do, this is the way we should go. They're saying, well, have we thought about this? And what happens if we think about this? And they're really teasing out of their teams that sort of diversity of opinion and those different viewpoints to come up with a much more robust decision, even than maybe they would have come up with themselves.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I've got some questions here that I just want to have a quick look that people have submitted. Great, so Margaret, we have an author. No pressure, Darren. She wants to write what's most important to me personally and be authentic and encourage others to be the same. So this was more of an answer to the poll. So
Sure.
it's all about what's most important to the person individually, I think I'm getting from Margaret, and how to be authentic to that.
And I think you see that in a lot of people in the team who have personal passions. We hear a lot within company meetings and things about people who are really concerned about sustainability or gender diversity and those kind of things. And being able to give expression to those viewpoints, I think, are really important as well. And I think as a business, we really value people with personal passions as well as people who have, as you say, like a subject matter expertise in a particular area. And bring your voice is as much about that, I think, as well, being able to express those kind of passions.
And maybe we should also, say a little bit about why we think it's important. It seems very obvious, but I think maybe we've skipped over that, waiting for more questions. And I think it's now fairly well established through a number of research that it's really good for business to bring diverse perspective in meetings, in decisions, and I think that's pretty clear. There is a lot of data around that, and at Amazon we do love data.
We do love data.
I think it's good for bottom line. It's good for making the right decisions. It's also a driver of more innovation, and it's diversity broadly, but it's kind of having different voices heard. So I think it's super important to make that point, even if on top of that, it's of course the right thing to do because you want people to be kind of engaged and have those opportunities. So I just wanted to make that point because I think it's kind of really key.
I totally agree. We have a number of affinity groups here at Amazon, which is usually born out of people's individual passion. Whether we have Women at, where I think Amplify has also come from, working closely with them.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have another pre-submitted question here, which I think actually, Bridget, you touched on earlier around how do we? that you brought it up naturally. How do the challenge of bringing your voice to work with? Obviously, we have a lot of flexible working here at Amazon. We have a lot of people who work from home or work remotely. And how do we foster that type of environment when you do have somebody who is working from home? And I think you mentioned it briefly about when you've got meetings, obviously making sure those people are involved.
Sure.
But what's your experience with this?
Yeah, I think you have to be really, really thoughtful about that. So I think it's also scheduling meetings at times sometimes which work for people, specifically when you are across time zones. And I think I've seen that in other organizations beyond Amazon, but we definitely work globally, which is one thing amazing about being at Amazon. So thinking about that, I think also I do find personally that video is much more effective than people being on the phone. So every time which is possible, except maybe if it's in the middle of the night and people are in pajamas, but we should definitely make sure people can be on video and you can engage with them in that way. And then it's just acknowledging people who are remote, bringing them in the conversation, giving them opportunities to jump in. It's really difficult to sometimes interrupt and make your voice heard. It's much more difficult than when you're in a room. There is a lot going on in terms of interactions in when you have the physical presence. So I think it's the responsibility of leaders, meeting organizers, and everyone really to bring those people in.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my experience with that introduction of video was such a powerful tool because I think we're all used to those sort of telephone conference lines where you don't really know who's there and it's really confusing.
Just hear a beep.
It's just a beep.
You're not
that's
sure
right.
who it is.
But having a visual prompt to hear the people effectively virtually in the room, I think as somebody who's chairing a discussion is a really useful way to be able to remember all the other different voices that are on that or in this meeting and making sure they get that time to speak. And technology makes flexible working so much easier now.
Sure.
And I think as a technology business, Amazon have really embraced that, and I think it really helps with people who've got different sorts of calls on their time.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think, as your point as well, it's kind of making more of that effort if you are chairing a meeting to get their voices involved, and it kind of falls into our live poll about having confidence to speak. So if you've got someone there to set you up, I think it makes the world of difference.
Completely,
Great. I think we have another pre-submitted question here. So I'll just read it verbatim. What positive impact result have you seen from encouraging everyone in the meeting to bring a voice? Yeah, that is a great question. So Darren, I'm sure you've seen this in your time.
One of the really great things for me is, and it happened to me fairly recently, is one of those situations where in a team meeting, you just, as the person theoretically chairing it, you can just sit back and the discussion itself just takes on a life of its own as people are sort of bouncing ideas off of each other, because it feels like a very collaborative space, and and like we said before, everybody's on an equal footing in sharing an opinion. And in the last couple of weeks, I've had several meetings where I've just sort of sat back and listened to the discussion and thought, this is fabulous, and it's not me having to say, let's talk about this or let's talk about that. It's everybody sort of working together and say, oh, last week you said this, would we be able to use that in this situation? And then really sort of build up a sort of much more thorough problem solving process. And I think as a participant in those meetings and as a leader in those meetings, they feel really powerful, and it's really collaborative and creative, and I think that's a great testament to how people bring their voice into those kind of situations.
Absolutely. Brigitte, you must have experienced this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. By the way, I think more robust debate, sometimes unexpected perspective, which really enrich the discussion. I think it's something we really love at Amazon. We encourage people to, what we say, have backbone. It's one of our leadership principles. So I think that seeing that, bringing that to life is really, I think, positive. I think, as I said, I believe at the beginning of the conversation, for me, it's also about creating better teams. Yeah. Teams where essentially people trust each other, where people feel they can speak. And we know that the ability for more people to communicate and engage in a team meeting is often a predictor of team performance. It's there is some fairly robust research which has been done about that, and I'm really actually interested. I've been for a while and passionate about this research because it brings really data to something which is otherwise a little bit difficult to pinpoint. And the predictor of performance in that case, it's research which is done on a fairly large scale, was really the balance of voice and the ability for people to feel psychologically safe in a team environment. It was more a predictor of performance than having some absolutely top star performers in the team. Yeah. So bring your voice is also part of this kind of a focus for me.
Totally agree. You don't kind of want a meeting there where everyone's saying, yes, I agree. I think it would be a really alien environment. And I do think, again, it's coming with that backbone that you mentioned, that people can say, hey, I don't agree with you. And obviously there's the commit part of our leadership principle, which means you might disagree, but then just go ahead and commit to it. But it's so important to at least say, hey, I don't agree with this, or I think this would be better, and kind of seeing that lead from there.
But I think there's also a real focus on, we always want to do better, we always want to innovate, we always want to simplify. And I think the danger of just, as you say, having people saying yes all the time is that you miss those opportunities. And I see this a lot where you see people actively looking to disconfirm, as it's called, like their beliefs. I think, well, this looks like the right thing to do, but rather than just go headlong into that, let's take some time to think, why not, and what are the other data points that might challenge that. And that's not seen, I've never seen that as perceived as a negative thing. That's part of collaboration and everybody having a voice to sort of to create an even better decision. And I think that sort of debate, which is often seen as, well, that could be quite challenging, at Amazon, that's just part of how you discuss a problem and how you come up with the best solution. And I think that is a really good way of avoiding those meetings where everybody's just yes, of course, yes, not like that.
Well, I can confirm it could be a little bit strange when you join initially.
Yes,
but I think you definitely get used to it, and I see the value. I think we have more questions. Right?
Yeah, right. I was going to say, because kind of related to that, we've got a question from Diane here about what do you like about working for Amazon, and I think your perspective would be great here, Brigitte. As you said, when you first came in, it felt a little bit strange to be kind of having those type of meetings, or maybe a bit of lack of the hierarchy, maybe. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So I think joining Amazon for me was a carefully thought through decision, and I think for me there were three things which drove that decision, and I would say I haven't been disappointed on any of those three that I mentioned. But I think and so one is really the long-term view, which is we talk about thinking big, but we really focus on the long term, and we don't trade off short-term decisions for kind of long-term benefits. I think it's super important. It's something I've been really passionate about, and I've been in organizations where that was not the case, so for me it was a really important criteria, and it's something I really value, and it's it's really strong in the culture, it's strong in our leadership principle, it's strong in the way we make decisions. And prioritize our resources and initiatives, so really important. The second one for me, it's fairly obvious, and we've talked about that already, is the customer. I think it's when you think about Amazon as a customer yourself, it's really about the customer service, the customer focus, this ability, the convenience, this ability of finding anything and getting that delivered to your door so fast and so quickly. And we call it this obsession on delighting our customers.
Yeah.
And again, there are often trade-offs in terms of sometimes making decisions which might drive more profit versus pleasing our customers. We'll always choose the customer side, and I knew it would be the case, but something for me which is really important. The third one I would say, which is something I've definitely confirmed joining, and it started in some ways in the interview process, is the people side. Having met some amazingly interesting, diverse, smart people in my interview loop, and then having those people in my teams working as peers around me, it's been super important for me, and I think it's really a big focus and one thing I really value in my kind of Amazon journey. Still early on, but I'm still discovering, by the way, and learning. It's a fairly big and complex organization.
No, I agree. I love work. I'm the same when I'm in meetings sometimes, and I look around and I hear all those different voices and opinions. I'm like, wow, I work with some really smart people, but that's super engaging to me. So I'm really happy that was also one of the reasons that drew you to Amazon.
Absolutely, it was.
And then Darren, what was it like working for Amazon?
15 years.
15 years,
All of those things, absolutely. I think, and the great thing is that never goes away. I mean, those kind of drivers are still, for me as well, incredibly important. I think it's also worth emphasising, and maybe of interest to people watching this, is it's also great fun. I mean, some of the things we get to do and some of the tasks that we're working on are really interesting. And
he has a great job.
I get to meet authors every day and deal with and they're fabulous. I mean, it's so inspiring to go and meet people who are using our tools and services and doing such amazing things with them. So that's partly what sort of keeps me here. The fact that it's great fun as well. And I think it just every day is different. I get bored quite easily with a lot of things, and I just think if I got to work on a Monday and thought I know exactly what my week is going to look like, I'm going to tick all these boxes and then go home, I just think that would just not motivate me at all. I think coming into work thinking, okay, I know some of the things I'm going to do, but equally there's lots of other things that are going to come along and challenge me across the course of the week. Means you're constantly learning, constantly growing, and constantly sort of being challenged, which I think even after 14 years, 8 months, whatever it is, that has not gone away. And I've worked in other businesses for a much shorter period of time that's felt a lot longer. Here it feels like I've been here for a few weeks, and it constantly amazes me when I think, actually no, I've been here 15 years. It's astonishing.
That's amazing. How much growth we've gone through then, and you've seen it. You've seen it all. Got another question from Gregory. What is the key thing that has made you an effective leader at Amazon? So, good question, Gregory, by the way. Really good question. If you want to distill that into something, but yeah, great question. Like, what would you say is the Darren, I'm going to you.
Thank you so
you're
much.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Obviously, I'm a hugely effective leader at Amazon. Clearly, I am. I think there's so many different things, and it is really hard to distill it down to one thing. I think one of the things I found most rewarding about the whole thing is collaboration and working with others and working with your team. And actually, as a leader, I think we often get measured as much in the success of our teams as the success of us as individuals. And I think helping your team grow and helping your team sort of deal with all the problems that they face is a really important way of being a leader, rather than thinking I'm at this level in the business, therefore I need to go and deliver stuff and it's all down to me kind of thing. I think collaboration and bringing people into problem solving, I think, is a really important part of being an effective leader here.
Yeah, and for me it's still early days. I'm still on this journey, so I wouldn't claim of being an effective leader.
You are.
You
are an effective leader.
But I think I would just call out two things which are really important to me. One is the ability to really keep an open mind on learning, and we have, again, as you can see, I love our leadership principles, but it's kind of a learn and be curious focus, which it's really important to me, and it's not something which is important since I joined Amazon. It always was. It's one reason why I love books, but really, I think if you want to be successful at Amazon, you have to be super humble about what you don't know, what you have to discover. There is some part of you which has to kind of somehow unlearn some of those things maybe you were doing before, because I think we have sometimes we call them peculiar, but some approaches and blueprints and playbooks which are very effective, very interesting, but you have to kind of really completely understand those. So it's really, kind of learning, keeping an open mind, and constantly challenging yourself, and realizing that you don't know, and then you can improve.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really good point there about Amazon is such a big company, and obviously I hope would be a really well-known brand that customers know. But there's still a lot of unexplored domain here.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think when you said about like, oh, you have to unlearn stuff or go away and learn stuff, because we're dealing with problems that, innovative problems we've never had to face before as a company, or we have to move really quickly on things, which is something I think that we're really proud of. There's not going to be the answer for everything. There's not a process for anything. There's not a drive for anything. And how have you found that in your journey of Amazon career, having to learn or pick up all this? And we speak our own language, I think, here as well with the leadership principles. So yeah, how have you found that? That's like your first year.
There is definitely your own language and your set of acronyms you have to learn. It's pretty hard at the beginning. Well, look, I think it's part of the journey and discovery, and I think you have to do that properly. But I think there are some mechanisms or processes to really help, on board. And I think you mentioned that as well. Darren is building your kind of your network. Lots of people are really willing to kind of help you along the way. So that's, kind of, I think, super effective as well. We are a big organization, but at the same time you have to be kind of own your own journey, be very entrepreneurial in the way you drive your business, but also you kind of somehow drive your journey and professional career at Amazon. So I think that's part of the story when you start working in this kind of big organization, but yet fairly entrepreneurial. So yeah, it takes time, and 13 months in, I feel I'm still learning, discovering this business which I didn't know we had. Pushing this idea which other people already had, and that's quite interesting.
But I think that never goes away.
Yeah,
As well.
I was going to say, you said yourself.
Yeah, in fact, I was talking to somebody who joined our team last week who said, you've been here such a long time, you mustn't know everything. It's like, actually, I know such a small percentage of what's going on around here. We're all learning, and you can learn from anybody within the business. And I think as the whole company, you can see people just thrive on the opportunity to learn new skills, to learn new things. And that enables you to grow as the business grows as well. And as you say, Roisin, the business has grown in all sorts of different ways. And the employees, the people in the team have grown with it. It's not like anybody came in thinking, we know all of this from day one. We're always learning and growing our skill sets.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as someone who's been here for 7 years as well, I've definitely seen us grow beyond how many businesses we've added, and we seem to be launching stuff every time. So I feel like I'm learning things every day. That never really goes away. I totally agree. Okay, we've had a few more questions come in. Let's see, we've got another pre-submitted question on what is the internal movement like within country, internationally? Any examples owning your career? Well, Brigitte, you've already said about like how you've lived in a few different places throughout your career.
Yeah, and that was just for full disclosure, not with Amazon, but I'm super impressed by the fact that when we have such a here, we're both based in London, such diverse teams of people coming from all over the world. I've been here, as I said, just over a year, and already, in my team, quite a few people have moved to other Amazon businesses in other countries, in the US, in other parts of Europe. I've already recruited, a couple of folks who were in other Amazon businesses in other parts of the world. Recently, someone in India, and it's all fluid, encouraged, and I think that works really well. So for people, and I really would encourage that, who want opportunities to kind of work abroad, and I think that's another way to learn and discover things. It's been for me such a defining part of my life to be able to kind of live, abroad. Amazon is a great company to be able to do that at scale, and we again really make that easy and very fluid.
Yeah, I mean, as a global business, when you're looking at your next step in your Amazon career, and you can look at all the roles and departments around you, as a global business, that's the scope of where you can look. You can be looking anywhere around the world. There are so many different teams scattered around that you could, if you want to sort of get involved with. And for me personally, my own sort of personal choice is I want to be in the UK at this point in time. Yeah. But equally, I feel like that could, my daughter does a GCSE, she does phenomenally well, goes off to university in Australia. Maybe there's some opportunities to follow her. And we've had people in our team have gone to. Well, yeah, maybe I should tell her that before she says that. We've had people in our team go to Australia, Japan, Seattle, Luxembourg. There's so many different places where there's opportunities, and I think the key thing is you as an individual think about, where do I want my career to go? What are the important things for me, and discuss those with your manager and build a plan that gets you there. And I think we're all owners at Amazon. Owning your career path is a really important part of that. And I love those conversations with my team and with my manager. We say, here are the kind of things I'd like to do. Here are the kind of things that really excite me. Where can I take those? And just seeing what the scope of the opportunities are.
I must say, from a recruitment side, I definitely see a lot of people moving around, and I think what's always been really great for me is that how much managers encourage that movement. I always think there's sometimes a perception generally that if you're great internal talent and you want to move, that managers are like, no, keep you in my team. And I think it's been really refreshing that it's actually really encouraged if it's the right thing to do for that person and that person's choice. How managers are like, go do this, and I think that's a really wonderful aspect here.
And like we said earlier, I think it's in many ways how managers are sort of thought of is how have you brought your team on, and if you're jealously guarding everybody, well, you're doing a great job within your team, but the broader business isn't benefiting. To actually have a team that is regularly sort of moving through other different parts of the business and learning new skills and things is a huge accolade for the manager as well as obviously for the individual moving.
Totally great. Right. Another one from Bernard or Bernard. What are the different levels at Amazon, especially between head of, senior manager, principal, director, as an often clear experience level you're looking for? Totally agree with this, by the way. I think it flags back to our own Amazonian language, and I'll let you guys answer, but we're not super precious about job titles, so I think it'd be interesting kind of exploring what job titles mean here, and when we're talking about levels, probably just talking about the seniority of what that means to us. I'll go to Darren first, just as somebody who's probably gone through this quite a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be confusing, and I think often, especially externally, and I can imagine people looking at job adverts and things think, well, what exactly does this mean? I think the key thing is around the detail behind the title, because there can be so many seemingly sort of innocuous job titles where when you read through the job description are fascinating pieces of work, with lots of different scope and lots of different sort of responsibilities, and I think that's often the key thing to focus on, and for you as an individual to think about what kind of things do you want out of a role and not get too worried about the exact title. Are the responsibilities, are the area of focus the kind of thing that motivate you? Because that's often, I think, the bigger part of how important a role is or how senior a role is. I think is what you're actually doing that makes more sort of tangible.
Yeah, I always think, actually, I'd be curious to hear about you, Brigitte, as someone who more so recently went through the interview process here, that the job descriptions, yes, totally understand, can be confusing, and it's really interesting to read the story, but also, like, once you're in process, sometimes you get more of that informational detail by speaking to a recruiter. And through your experience, do you find like the job description helped with knowing exactly what you're going to do, or was it more helpful going through the process, or to kind of fully get a bigger picture?
I think it's definitely an important question for all of you who are kind of watching or listening. I do think that when you somehow make the decision to start discussing opportunities at Amazon, it's super important to be clear about the fact that it's about joining Amazon rather than taking on a role. And I'm not saying that lightly. It's also, of course, applying for a specific job and all of that I get. But we really tend to want to recruit people we think are going to fit with our Amazon culture and meet the bar at Amazon. We often say we have a very high bar, but also people who we feel are going to thrive and be happy in that culture and environment. So when you join Amazon, and yes, you happen to kind of have landed in a specific role, but again, as we've described, and we know Darren is an exception, but people do move.
You moved as well, really recently. A perfect example.
It's just kind of a lateral move, but I moved. And so it's important to have that in mind. And to answer the question more specifically, for me, the process, meeting people, having the recruiter also guide you through the leadership principles, really important to do your homework, try to understand what that means, because the hiring process is really built around that and around you being able to map successfully to those. I think it's where you kind of understand more and we can answer the question better. And I think it's through all of those discussions with Amazonians who are going to be interviewing that you really get a sense of what the role, but then the opportunity of working at Amazon is like. So I think it's important to make these distinctions. It's the role, but it's also joining Amazon.
Yeah,
I think also it's worth pointing out the job description's a starting point. You know,
Yeah,
and
exactly
in my
that, I
time
think
here,
it's a good way
I've
of saying
probably
it.
had 4 official roles, but it feels like actually I've had probably about 20 because that what I've been doing in each of those roles has changed so much over time. And it may just be for a certain period of time something needs doing and I can get involved in that. Other times it becomes a more sort of fundamental change. So the job description's a starting point, and as you say, I think it can kick off a conversation with a recruiter or a hiring manager. Well, where does this role take me? What kind of things am I going to be doing? And if that sounds interesting, then that's I think the sort of key decision.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
great feedback. Got another question from Laura. It's a role specific for Darren. Are there any upcoming Kindle Direct Publishing, looking at my acronyms, developments that you're able to talk about at the moment publicly? So that's one question. And the second question, also, what one thing would you like your industry and then also customers, that's a broad term for you there, Darren, to know about Kindle Direct Publishing?
Well, from a KDP point of view, we're always working on new developments. It's one of the great things about this role is that I spend a lot of time talking to authors, hearing about the things that are working, hearing about the things that they'd like to see added to our services. And there's a few things we've been working on recently which we're not sort of quite ready to sort of go out publicly with, but 2019 is looking like it's going to be a really exciting year, and so watch this space. And then what would I like people to know about KDP? I think the main thing is just how exciting and vibrant it is as a part of the publishing industry. In many ways, I mean, the publishing industry has been around for probably hundreds of years in various shapes or another. I've not been in the publishing world quite as long as that, but I've been around for a little bit of time, but now feels like the most exciting time to be in publishing in its many different sort of roles. And I think Kindle Direct Publishing and the authors using Kindle Direct Publishing, most importantly, are driving so much of that. And I think it leads to really great books being published in areas that maybe wouldn't have been published before. People finding a voice, authors finding a voice, where maybe that wouldn't have been open to them before. And I think that's just going to continue to grow and grow, and that's what makes me come into work with a big smile on my face every morning.
Well, sort of relating to coming into work, we've had a couple of questions here. So one pre-submitted, and I'm going to group them together because I think they're somewhat related, about do you have any tips on how to interview well for Amazon? And then a question from Victoria about what are the key attributes of an Amazonian which you look at for interviews. So kind of related, but from both of you, Brigitte, I'll go with you as well. Like, any tips on how to interview well with Amazon, and when you're interviewing yourself, what are you kind of looking for as a sort of the key attribute? I'm pretty sure leadership principles are going to come up in this one again.
No, I think you're right. I think Darren is an expert, and I've done actually a few interviewing cycles with him, and I know he's recruited maybe hundreds of people at Amazon. So my experience is a little more limited, but what I would say as a recent interviewee, I suppose, and having gone through that process, it's what I was saying earlier a little bit, is one, kind of rely on your recruiter. Usually the recruiting team does a pretty good job at briefing you, sharing with you the leadership principles, and you should spend some time really understanding them, not at a superficial and conceptual level, but what does that might mean, if we talk about customer obsession, how do you kind of think about the trade-offs, as I was discussing earlier? And then I think there is, it's public information, but there is a blurb for each of those leadership principles, which is very well crafted and really gives you the gist of how we think about those. So that would be the first thing, asking lots of questions to the people who are kind of in your loop. They will ask you questions because there is a fairly set process, which you're right, the backbone is going to be assessing you against those leadership principles. But then being curious yourself and showing that curiosity is I think super important. As you said earlier, we are a company which likes debate questions. We like
questions.
We like asking why and going fairly deep. And a lot of our meetings are about asking questions and in a way challenging to make sure we look at all the different perspectives, disconfirming our beliefs. And so I think in the interviewing process, think about that, because it means that it's also about making sure you're a good fit, but also making sure you will thrive at Amazon. It's also it's a two-way thing, and it's kind of really, really important. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the interviewing process. To give guidance, I think it's a really great question.
Yeah,
for the audience.
I think you can imagine. Yeah, I think, and you're right. I think the leadership principles are such a core part of it, because they are it's a bit of a cliche, they are sort of living and breathing part of our work here. You know, when it comes to solving problems, thinking about customer obsession, thinking about dive deep, and all the other different leadership principles do really help. And I think when you're, as you say, the interviewers in the process are going to be looking to see how you can demonstrate those kind of qualities and evidence-based as well. I think it's really interesting to think about what have you done that really demonstrates a propensity in those kind of areas. And in many cases you can imagine, especially for people outside of Amazon, looking through those leadership principles, think, well, I'm not sure I've really done those kind of things. Sometimes you can approach a customer obsession problem or a problem in a customer obsessed way in a very different way to how it's written, but you can just think about that, this is what it means in my experience, and talk about that. And I think coming to an interview, having thought through the leadership principles and thought through how you may have demonstrated those in the past is a really good starting point. But I think also it's your opportunity to interview your interviewers. You know, is this the right role for you? Is Amazon the right role for you, the right business for you? And I think it's very much a two-way process. So take the time to really think about what you want to know and think about what you need to hear from the individuals as well as from the hiring manager or whoever it might be, so that when you have that opportunity to speak to a number of different Amazon people, you get the value out of it that you want as well. It is very much, as you say, a two-way process. And you see so many people coming in for an interview sort of nervously thinking, okay, this is it, I'm going to get bombarded with questions and it's really going to be just sort of a Q&A process. And it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. It should be much more about a discussion. We're all learning about each other to come up with the right decision when it comes to that hiring choice.
Yeah, and maybe I want to add something. Hopefully I can say that you will not be fine. But
got the elbow on standby.
yeah, I think it's also, we work really hard to make that a process which is fair and unbiased. And you know, it's been something I've been really kind of pleased to see how committed we are to making sure, you know, our kind of interview questions are inclusive and we get different perspective, exactly what we were talking about, you know, from different parts of the organization in our kind of interviewing cycle. So it's, you know, not one person making the decision, it's multiple, often, you know, quite a lot. And we're going to have some, I would say, fairly rigorous debriefing process where we really try to kind of have a very objective view. And I've been in quite a few organizations which had, you know, pretty good processes, but I have to say it's the most stringent process I've seen anywhere so far in my professional journey, and I've been around a while, so very impressed by that.
But there's such important decisions for both people. I mean, the candidate is making a life-changing decision to join the business.
It's for both. I think it's for
Amazon
both
is trying to raise that quality of its team with every hire. It's really important. So the process is very vigorous. It can be tiring. I mean, you know, there's no doubt on both sides, actually. It can be quite a tiring process. But it does, more often than not, lead to really good decisions on both sides. So it's good.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just to give some context from the recruitment side, that, you know, the interviews that we have, as you say, it's not just one person you're meeting who's the hiring manager. You're meeting 3 or 4, sometimes 5 individuals. So yeah, it can be an exhausting process, but I think what I hope would be rewarding, and I still remember my interview like yesterday, even though it was 7 years ago, not that it was some sort of traumatic experience, but I was really impressed how many people I got to meet and leave the interview day really understanding what Amazon was and what the role was, really importantly, because I feel if you've invested all that time and kind of left without having that two-way conversation, that's the worst experience for me, as I can think of candidates who kind of got no idea what Amazon is about or what that role's about. So yes, I think you're totally right. It's a very vigorous process, but it's designed to help make those decisions for both parties like a lot easier and frictionless. Great. I think we've got another question here from Sophie, which is, how is individual success measured at Amazon? So who would like to take that one? I'm not sure which one to go for that one, because that's such a broad, I mean, here it can be so broad.
I mean, I can start with you know, probably a fairly brief perspective, and you can, I'm sure, go much deeper based on your many years. But yeah, I think it's not necessarily usually different from other organizations in the sense that there is a component, you know, being a leader of a team, it's going to be a lot about somehow my ability to, you know, drive success for my team. I think you said that really well earlier, and then so, you know, in some ways, you know, I feel my success is my team's success. I think it's important to understand that. But then, you know, we have a number of criteria. They tend to, again, you know, revolve, again, a mixture of you know, metrics and deliverables, but it's about delivering results, and it's about the alignment with some of the leadership principles we've talked about quite a lot. And the way we objectify that, of course, your manager will play a big role in that process. But it's also about getting perspective from different people in the organization. So we do a lot of kind of we call that peer feedback. And then you're having discussions which are not just focused on what we would call areas for growth, but also things which are really your strengths. And I'm a big believer, having 2 kids, it's been a lot of conversations, and I like the growth mindset model where you really focus on strengths as well as maybe areas of improvement. So I think we try to kind of take this perspective, or at least I understand in recent years it's been a really big focus, which I think is great.
Yes.
I think that's spot on. I think you're right, and it is that delicate combination between metric-driven specifics, but then also approach. And again, the leadership principles are a key part of that. But this is a business where I think if you sort of clocked in at 9 o'clock in the morning and then you clocked out at 5 o'clock in the evening, and you didn't think about you weren't passionate about your work, you could succeed, but you're not going to sort of really sort of achieve all that the business would hope for you. Because I think so many people just find ways to do more, and they find opportunities to say, well, that was my target, but actually I can see an opportunity here to go that little bit further, and that is such an amazing result for everybody, for customers. So I think that kind of metric-driven specifics, as well as style, thinking, leadership principles, those kind of things, it's a sort of an interesting balance.
Well, thank you, Sophie. That was a really good question. I think actually that is our last question, because we need to wrap things up. So I want to say a big thank you, Darren, Brigitte, for spending the time. Really appreciate it. I feel like I learned a lot as well. And just to wrap things up, we'd like to take another final live poll from you, the audience, to hear about, has this session helped you think about or inspired you about how to bring your voice to work? Or I think as well from, we had a fellow author as well about thinking how it influences your writing, etc. But yeah, a big thank you from all of us for joining us. We will be sending a survey out to get your feedback to help us improve future sessions, but hopefully to see you at another session that we'll be scheduling soon.